The Grand Council chamber of Valeri Prime was silent, except for the soft hum of emergency power systems. Once, this hall had hosted delegates from 1,000 worlds. Now only 12 remained, the last leaders of a dying civilization. Ambassador. Sun stood at the center of the circular room, his four-fingered hands trembling as he addressed the elders. The blue skin around his large eyes had darkened with exhaustion. For 30 days, he had barely slept, as the reports of fallen colonies poured in. The outer defenses have failed, Sun said quietly. Our last shield generators will collapse within 5 days. The Korth fleet numbers in the thousands. Elder Lee, the oldest among them at 300 years, leaned forward on her hovering chair. How many of our people remain? Just over 4 million, Sun replied. All that's left of the 12 billion who once called the Confederation home. Outside the council chamber's towering crystal windows, the once beautiful capital city of Valeri Prime lay in ruins. The Korth bombardment had turned parks into craters and shattered the famous singing towers. Refugee camps filled every open space, their people huddled under emergency barriers, watching the sky with dread. We have tried everything, said Elder Park, his voice heavy with defeat. We offered peace. We offered trade. We offered surrender. The Korth want nothing but our complete destruction. The Korth Dominion had appeared at the edge of Valeri space 3 years ago. At first, the peaceful Valeri, who had never developed weapons beyond what was needed for asteroid mining, believed there had been a misunderstanding. The Valeri were known throughout the galaxy as healers and artists. Their medical technology had saved countless species from extinction, but the Korth were different. They communicated only through destruction. When the Galactic Council sent ambassadors, the Korth ships reduced them to atoms. There is one option we haven't considered, Sun said, his voice almost a whisper. Elder Choi, keeper of the ancient records, looked up sharply. You cannot mean— I do, Sun said. The emergency beacon. The room erupted in fearful murmurs. Everyone knew what emergency beacon meant. Centuries ago, when the Valeri first explored beyond their home system, they had encountered a planet, unlike any other, a death world of such extreme conditions that it seemed impossible anything intelligent could evolve there. Yet it had. Humans. Elder Lee breathed the word like a forbidden curse. They were quarantined for good reason. Sun walked to the ancient control panel embedded in the floor. I've studied the old records. Yes, they're violent. Yes, they think differently, but they survived conditions that would kill any of us in minutes. Their world tried to kill them every day, and instead of dying, they conquered it. The quarantine was unanimous, argued Elder Kim. Every species in the council agreed. Their thought patterns are too unpredictable, their aggression too ingrained. And yet, Sun countered, they built starships before they'd even unified their planet. They developed medical science while still fighting each other. Imagine what they could do against the Korth. Elder Choi shook her head. The humans would be trading one invader for another. You've seen the simulations. If they help us defeat the Korth, what's to stop them from taking our worlds for themselves? Sun looked out at the burning city. At least with humans, there's a chance of talking. The Korth give us no choice at all. Silence fell over the council. In the distance, another explosion lit up the night sky as a Korth scout ship broke through to test their weakening defenses. I was there, Elder Lee said finally. When we voted to quarantine Earth, they sent their first ambassadors. Brave ones. We turned them away not because we hated them, but because we feared them. Not for what they had done, but for what they could do. And now? Sun asked. Now we need exactly what we feared, she admitted. Put it to a vote. One by one, the elders pressed their palms to the ancient voting crystals. The result glowed in the center of the room. 8-4 against. Sun's fingers danced across the control panel, entering codes not used in centuries. A hidden compartment in the floor slid open, revealing a device of strangely primitive design, built to last millennia rather than to impress with elegance. This will broadcast on frequencies they still use, Sun explained. It contains everything they need to know about the Korth, about us, and most importantly, about how to break through the quarantine barriers. How long until they could reach us? asked Elder Park. "If they still have the technology we observed. Perhaps 2 weeks, if we can hold that long." Sun activated the beacon. A low, pulsing sound filled the chamber as the ancient device came to life, beaming its desperate signal across the darkness of space toward a small blue planet whose inhabitants had been judged too dangerous to join galactic society. As the council members filed out, Sun remained, watching the beacon's lights blink steadily. His assistant, young Hana, approached cautiously. "Will they really come?" she asked. Sun looked at the device, sending its call across the vast emptiness between stars. "They will come," he said. "The question is, what happens when they do?" The old records call them unpredictable, violent and resourceful beyond reason. They call them Deathworlders because they evolved on a planet that should have killed them. Hana shivered. "And we're asking them to save us." Sun nodded slowly. "We aren't just asking for help. We're unleashing something the galaxy has never truly seen." He pressed his hand against the cool glass, looking at the stars. "May we survive their rescue." The signal arrived at Earth's deep space monitoring station at 3:47 a.m. At first, the night shift thought it was a glitch in the system. The frequency hadn't been used in over a century, and the pattern was unlike anything in their database. "Wake up, Dr. Yoon," the technician said into his comm. "You're going to want to see this." By dawn, the message had been decoded and authenticated. Word spread through the United Terran Defense Force like wildfire. After 200 years of isolation, after being judged too dangerous to join galactic society, somebody out there needed Earth's help. Admiral Yoon stood at the window of her office on the 120th floor of UTDF headquarters, watching the sun rise over New Seoul. At 63, she had never expected to see this day come. Her great-grandmother had been on the first contact mission, had stood before the Galactic Council as they delivered their verdict. Earth was to be quarantined, its people deemed too unpredictable, too aggressive to join civilized space. Her aide, Lieutenant J, entered with a tablet. "The full translation, ma'am." Kyun took it without looking away from the window. "Tell me the short version. A species called the Valyri is being wiped out by something called the Korth Dominion. The Valyri were part of the council that quarantined us. Now they're begging for our help because nobody else will stand against the Korth." A small bitter smile crossed Yoon's weathered face. "Ironic." "There's more," Jay said. "The message includes technical specifications to bypass the quarantine barrier. They're giving us the keys to our own prison." Yoon finally turned from the window. Behind her, the sprawling city was coming alive with morning traffic, people going about their lives without knowing that everything was about to change. "How bad is it for them?" "Very bad. Their message estimates complete extinction within 2 weeks. 4 million survivors, down from billions." Yoon closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was steel in her gaze. "Call the security." "Council, I want every ship we have ready to launch in 72 hours. 3 days later, Yoon stood on the bridge of the UTDF Vengeance, the newest and largest vessel in Earth's fleet. Through the viewscreen, she could see ships gathering in Earth orbit, a massive armada unlike anything humanity had ever assembled. 50 capital ships, each the size of a small city. 300 destroyers and cruisers, thousands of fighters and support craft. "Status report," she said. Commander Tay looked up from his console. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral. The last. Marine transport just cleared atmosphere. We're at full strength." "And the quarantine barrier?" "The Valyri codes check out. Our simulations show we can punch through at these coordinates." He highlighted a section of the holographic display. "We'll need to move fast and in formation. Any stragglers might get caught in the barrier's reset protocols." Yoon nodded. In the 2 centuries since the quarantine, humanity had tried countless times to break through the energy barrier that surrounded their solar system. They'd failed each time with devastating losses. The aliens' technology was simply too advanced, but now they had the codes handed over by the very people who had imprisoned them. "Admiral," her aide said quietly, "you should know, 97% of the fleet is volunteering for this mission. We had to turn people away." Yoon wasn't surprised. Every human alive had grown up with stories of the quarantine, had looked up at the stars, and wondered what might have been if Earth had been welcomed instead of feared. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a chance to prove the Council wrong. "What about the colonists?" she asked. 30,000 volunteered. "We've selected the 10,000 with the most relevant skills. They're ready to help rebuild the Valyri worlds if there's anything left to rebuild." Yoon checked the time. In 20 minutes, the greatest fleet humanity had ever built would attempt to break a barrier that had contained them for generations. If they succeeded, Earth would finally rejoin the galaxy, not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as saviors answering a desperate call. She pressed a button on her command. "Chair, this is Admiral Yoon to all ships. Final communications with Earth will end in 15 minutes as we begin our approach to the barrier. If anyone wishes to send personal messages home, now is the time." Around her, bridge crew members spoke quietly into their comms, saying what might be final goodbyes to loved ones. Yoon had no one to call. Her life had been the UTDF, preparing for a day she never truly believed would come. Instead, she walked to her ready room and opened a small wooden box on her desk. Inside was a tarnished silver pin, the insignia her great-grandmother had worn on that fateful first contact mission. "We're going back, Grandmother," she whispered, pinning it to her uniform. "And this time they need us." When she returned to the bridge, the crew was waiting. On the main view screen, she could see the captains of every ship in the fleet, patched in for her address. Yoon looked at their faces, some nervous, some determined, all ready to make history. 200 years ago, she began, the galaxy looked at humanity and saw only our capacity for violence. They saw our history of war, our competitive nature, our refusal to back down from a fight. They called us too dangerous and locked us away. She paused, letting her words sink in. They weren't wrong about us. We are dangerous when threatened. We do fight harder than most species can imagine. But they missed something important about humans. We fight hardest for others, not just ourselves. The faces on the screen nodded in agreement. Today we answer a call for help from a dying people. The same people who once feared us now need exactly what they feared. We will not disappoint them. Yoon straightened her uniform, her great-grandmother's pin catching the light. They called us Deathworlders because our planet tried to kill us every day, and we survived anyway. Now let's show them what Earthborn warriors can really do. A roar of approval came through the comm system, echoing across the bridge. "All ships, formation Delta. Prepare to breach quarantine on my mark. Let's go save the galaxy." The human fleet emerged from hyperspace directly into chaos. Commander Q's first view of Valyri Prime wasn't the gleaming jewel described in ancient records, but a world on fire. Orbital platforms burned, debris fields clouded the sensor readings, and the planet's once famous azure oceans were now stained with ash, visible even from space. "Status report," Q ordered, standing on the bridge of the destroyer Thunderbolt. His tactical officer, Ji Hai, looked up from her console. "Detecting over 300 Korth vessels in orbit. They've formed a blockade pattern. Planetary shields are down to 12% and failing. Ground-based communications indicate the last Valyri stronghold is under heavy bombardment." Q studied the tactical display. The Korth ships were arranged in a loose formation, clearly not expecting any opposition. Why would they? According to the Valyri distress signal, no species in the galaxy had been willing to stand against the Korth Dominion. He keyed his comm. "This is Commander Q to all ships. Deploy as planned. Thunder Squadron, take position at these coordinates. Lightning Group, prepare to drop from above. Earth Group, hold position as reserve." As the human vessels moved into formation, the Korth seemed barely to notice. Their ships continued their methodical bombardment of the planet below, like predators too focused on wounded prey to sense a new threat. "They haven't even raised their shields," Ji-Hai said, disbelief in her voice. Q's expression hardened. "They will. All ships, weapons free, fire at will." The darkness of space lit up as human railguns, missiles, and energy weapons opened fire simultaneously. The first volley caught the Korth completely unprepared. 7 of their largest vessels erupted into fireballs before they could even register what was happening. On the planet's surface, Ambassador Sun stood with the remaining Valyri leaders on a balcony overlooking their last city. Above them, the night sky suddenly blazed with light. Explosions among the Korth blockade that had been pounding them for weeks. They came, Elder Lee whispered, her voice trembling. The humans actually came. Sun watched through a viewfinder. As unfamiliar ships, angular utilitarian vessels clearly built for war rather than beauty, tore through the Korth formation. The humans fought unlike anything he had ever witnessed, their ships moving in formations that seemed chaotic, yet somehow perfectly coordinated. Back in orbit, the Korth recovered from their surprise and began to return fire. Their weapons, plasma, lances that had reduced Valyri shields to ash, splashed against the hulls of human vessels with minimal effect. Minor damage to decks 7 and 8, reported Jihai, as the Thunderbolt shuddered from a direct hit. Shields holding at 92%, Q nodded unsurprised. Human ships had been built to withstand the electromagnetic storms of Jupiter and the radiation belts of their home system. They were ugly by galactic standards, all thick armor and redundant systems, but they were nearly impossible to kill with a single shot. "Bring us alongside that command ship," he ordered, pointing to the largest Korth vessel. "I want boarding teams ready." His executive officer, Hei Won, looked up sharply. "Boarding? Sir, we could destroy it from here." "We need prisoners," Q replied. "And intelligence. Admiral's orders." As the Thunderbolt closed with the massive Korth ship, the alien vessel unleashed everything it had. The human destroyer plowed through the barrage like a shark through water, absorbing punishment that would have vaporized any Valyri craft. "Boarding teams, deploy," Q ordered once they were alongside. Assault shuttles launched from the Thunderbolts, bays crossing the short distance to the Korth vessel. The human marines inside wore powered armor that made them look more like walking tanks than people. On the surface, the Valyri Council watched in stunned silence as a secondary view screen showed footage from a human shuttle's external camera. It displayed human soldiers cutting through a Korth hull with plasma torches, then storming inside. "They're boarding them," Elder Choi gasped. "No species has ever successfully boarded a Korth vessel. Their internal defenses mean nothing to them," Sun finished, watching as the humans fought their way through the Korth ship with brutal efficiency. The human marines moved through the alien corridors like a force of nature. Their tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had seen, not the coordinated precision of Galactic Council peacekeepers, but something primal and adaptive. They used debris as cover, set ambushes, and fought with a violence that made even the warlike Korth fall back in confusion. "The Korth are breaking formation," Jihai announced on the Thunderbolt's bridge. 30 vessels attempting to jump to hyperspace." Q's eyes narrowed. "Not happening. All ships, target their drive systems." Nothing escapes. Human destroyers pounced on the retreating Korth ships, disabling their engines with surgical precision. Within hours, the space around Valyri Prime was littered with drifting, powerless Korth vessels. In the planetary capital, cheers erupted as the bombardment finally ceased. For the first time in weeks, the sky above was quiet. The Valyri poured into the streets, looking up at the stars where their saviors had arrived. But in the council chamber, the mood was more complex. The elders watched the battle footage in silence, seeing the humans fight in ways that confirmed everything the Galactic Council had feared about them. "They're not just winning," Elder Park said quietly. "They're hunting." Sun nodded slowly. "We asked for salvation. We got predators." He turned to the others. "The question now is whether we've traded one doom for another." A communication alert sounded. On the main screen appeared a human face, Commander Q, his expression stern but professional. "This is Commander Q of the Earth vessel Thunderbolt. To Valyri leadership. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We request permission to send landing parties to assist with medical aid and defense coordination." Sun stepped forward. "This is Ambassador Sun. Permission granted, Commander." "And thank you," Q nodded once. "Just doing what you asked, Ambassador. Though I should warn you, this was only their advance force. The main Korth fleet will know we're here now, and when they come, they'll be ready for us." As the transmission ended, Sun looked around at the other Valyri leaders. "We wanted saviors," he said quietly. "We got warriors instead." Elder Lee, her ancient eyes filled with a mixture of hope and dread, replied, "The question is, which will we need more in the days to come?" The landing zone smelled of smoke and fear. Admiral Yoon stepped off the shuttle ramp onto Valyri soil, her boots crunching on glass from shattered buildings. A delegation of Valyri officials waited nearby, their blue skin ashen with exhaustion, their large eyes blinking rapidly in the harsh sunlight, streaming through their damaged atmospheric shields. "Admiral Yoon," Ambassador Sun said, stepping forward with a formal bow. "On behalf of the 4 million survivors of the Valyri Confederation, I welcome you to what remains of our world." Yoon returned the gesture, hiding her shock at the devastation around them. The reports hadn't prepared her for this. Once magnificent crystalline towers lay in ruins. Makeshift hospitals overflowed with wounded. Children, at least she assumed they were children, huddled together, watching the human soldiers with enormous, wary eyes. "Ambassador," she replied, "the United Terran Defense Force stands ready to assist with humanitarian aid and planetary defense." Sun gestured toward a partially damaged building that still retained some of its former elegance. "Please, our temporary council chambers are this way. The elders are waiting." As they walked, Yoon noticed the mixture of fear and hope on the faces of Valyri civilians. They cleared a path, some bowing deeply, others pulling their children closer. As the human delegation passed, "They're afraid of us," she observed quietly. Sun hesitated before answering. "You must understand, Admiral. Until 2 days ago, you were just stories used to frighten children, the dangerous Deathworlders, quarantined for the good of the galaxy." Yoon's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more as they entered the council chamber. Inside, 7 elderly Valyri sat in a semicircle. Their translucent skin showed the network of blood vessels beneath, pulsing with stress. The oldest among them, Elder Lee, gestured for Yoon to sit opposite them. "Before we begin," Lee said, her voice thin but steady, "I wish to convey our profound gratitude. Your people came when no one else would." Yoon nodded once. "I appreciate your thanks, Elder, but let's be clear. We came because you gave us the codes to break our quarantine. 200 years of isolation ended because you needed us." The tension in the room thickened. Hearn felt her aide, Lieutenant J, shift uncomfortably beside her. "Yes," Lee acknowledged, "and now that the immediate danger is past, you deserve to know why that quarantine existed." Elder Choi waved a 4-fingered hand, activating a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed the early Valyri encounters with humanity, Earth's first attempts at joining the galactic community. 2 centuries ago, we studied your species with great interest," Choi explained. "Your adaptability, your resilience. No other known species evolved on a world as hostile as Earth. You call it home. We call it a death world." The display shifted to show scenes from human history, wars, conflicts, but also great achievements, artistic wonders, acts of tremendous compassion. "Your capacity for violence alarmed us," Lee continued, "but it was your unpredictability that truly frightened the Council. Other species follow predictable patterns. Humans do not." Yoon's commie. Device chimed softly. She glanced down to see a message from Captain June, who was examining captured Korth vessels in orbit. "Urgent. Found something. Need you to see this immediately." She looked up at the Valyri elders. "I appreciate this history lesson, but my people just fought a battle to save yours. I'd prefer if we focused on the current threat. The Korth will return, likely with reinforcements." Sun exchanged glances with the elders. "Admiral, the history and the current threat are the same issue." Before Yoon could respond, the chamber doors burst open. Captain June entered, his face pale despite the strict breach of protocol. Behind him came 2 Marines, dragging what appeared to be a data core salvaged from a Korth ship. "Admiral," June said, saluting quickly, "I apologize for the interruption, but this couldn't wait." Yoon nodded for him to continue. June connected the alien core to his tablet. "We captured this from the Korth command vessel. It contains their entire historical database and communications with the Galactic Council dating back 300 years. The Valyri elders stiffened. Elder Park made a small, choking sound. "The Korth," June continued, "weren't a natural evolution. They were engineered as biological weapons by an ancient species called the Forerunners, created as a way to manage problematic civilizations without direct intervention." He pulled up images of Korth physiology, showing clear signs of genetic manipulation. Their aggression, their tactics, even their ship designs, all programmed to make them effective at wiping out specific types of civilizations while leaving infrastructure relatively intact. "That's impossible," Elder Kim protested. "The Korth have been a plague on this galaxy for generations. If what you're saying were true, then the Council would have had to know," Yoon finished for him, her voice dangerously quiet. She turned to Lee. "Did they?" The ancient Valyri seemed to shrink before their eyes. "Not all members," she whispered. "Only the inner circle. I learned the truth 50 years ago when I joined." Captain June wasn't finished. "There's more, Admiral. According to these records, the Korth weren't just tolerated by the Council. They were directed." He displayed a star chart showing Korth movement patterns over centuries. Their attacks weren't random. They were systematically used to cull civilizations that the Council deemed troublesome, species that developed too quickly, questioned too much, or threatened the established order. Ambassador Sun stared at the elders in horror. "You knew, all this time?" Elder Lee's hands trembled. "The system worked for millennia. The Korth were controlled, used sparingly, like cauterizing a wound to save the patient." "And Earth?" Yoon asked, her voice ice. "Where do we fit in this arrangement?" Captain June pulled up one final file. According to this admiral, Earth wasn't quarantined out of fear alone. Humanity was assessed as the one species physiologically and psychologically capable of completely defeating the Korth. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Let me understand this," Yoon said slowly. "The Council didn't just fear us. They feared we would eliminate their convenient cleaners, their attack dogs." Her eyes narrowed. "So instead of welcoming us, they caged us." "It wasn't that simple," Elder Choi began. "It seems quite simple to me," Yoon cut him off. "The Council used the Korth to eliminate threats. We were identified as a threat to the Korth, so we were contained." She stood abruptly. "And now that the Korth have turned on their masters, suddenly we're worth freeing." Ambassador Sun stepped forward. "Admiral, please. Most of us knew nothing of this. Millions of innocent Valyri have died." "I don't blame your people, Ambassador," June said, softening slightly. "But the Council will answer for this." She turned to Captain June. "Secure all of this evidence. Lieutenant J, prepare a full report for Earth Command. We need to warn the fleet that the Korth they're fighting aren't just random aggressors. They're abandoned weapons now operating without controls." As the humans prepared to leave, Elder Lee called out, "Admiral, what do you intend to do with this information?" Yoon paused at the doorway. "First, we'll save what's left of your people because that's what we promised. Then we'll deal with the remaining Korth forces." Her eyes met Lee's across the chamber. "And after that? We're going to have a very interesting conversation with the Galactic Council." The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so silent. For 10,000 years, this vast hall had hosted representatives from every spacefaring civilization. Its walls were embedded with memory crystals, containing the collective wisdom of 100 species. Its dome, crafted from transparent materials mined from the void between stars, showed the galaxy in all its spinning glory. And now, for the first time in its history, a human stood at its center. Admiral Un walked slowly across the speaking floor, her UTDF uniform stark against the flowing robes and ornate exoskeletons of the council members. 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Valyri Prime. 3 weeks of fighting across dozen systems as the main Korth fleet responded to the human intervention. The gallery seats surrounding the chamber floor were packed. News of the humans' arrival had spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Species that had only heard stories of the quarantined Deathworlders now watched in fascination as one of them stood before the most powerful governing body in known space. High Counselor Tal, a tall willowy being with 6 arms and silver skin, spoke first. "Admiral Yoon of Earth, you stand before this council without invitation or permission. The quarantine placed upon your species remains legally binding." Yoon looked up at the semicircle of council members, her expression calm. "The quarantine ended the moment the Valyri sent us the codes to break it. Your legal technicalities mean nothing now." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. No one had ever addressed the council with such directness. "You were summoned by a desperate people without council authorization," said Councillor Mina, her crystalline form glinting under the chamber lights. "The Valyri acted illegally in their final hours. This does not constitute proper diplomatic contact." Yoon smiled thinly. "I'm not here for diplomatic contact, Councillor. I'm here to inform you of how things will be moving forward." The murmurs grew louder. Councillor Tal's silver skin flushed darker with emotion. "You have no authority to dictate terms to this council," he said. "Humanity remains an unproven, dangerous element in the galactic community." Yoon nodded to Lieutenant J, who activated a holographic display. Suddenly the chamber was filled with images: Korth ships bombarding civilian centers, Valyri cities in flames, refugee camps overflowing with wounded. "This is what your civilized galaxy looked like 3 weeks ago," Yoon said, her voice cutting through the horrified gasps of the council members. "The Valyri sent distress calls to every member of this council. Not one of you responded." She walked slowly around the display, letting the images shift to new scenes: human ships engaging, Korth vessels, medical teams treating Valyri wounded, engineering crews rebuilding planetary defense systems. "And this is what happened when the dangerous humans arrived." Councillor Mina leaned forward, her crystalline features rigid with disapproval. "We've received reports of your methods, Admiral. Your troops boarded Korth vessels. Your ships pursued retreating enemies. The brutality of your tactics has shocked many observers," Yoon gestured, and the display changed again. This time it showed something different: internal communications from the Galactic Council archives, extracted from the Korth command ship's database. "Perhaps we should discuss a different kind of brutality," she said quietly. "The kind that creates a species specifically designed to destroy others, then sets them loose when convenient." The chamber erupted in chaos. Many council members shot to their feet. Others began shouting in their native languages. High Councillor Tal slammed a ceremonial staff against the floor, calling for order. "These are outrageous accusations," he thundered, once the noise subsided. "The Korth are a natural evolutionary branch. Aggressive, certainly, but not engineered by the Forerunners as biological weapons." Yoon finished for him. "Not maintained by this council as convenient cleaners when a civilization became problematic." She nodded to Jay again, who displayed genetic sequencing data and historical communication logs that left no room for denial. The evidence was overwhelming: centuries of council manipulation, using the Korth to eliminate potential rivals or troublesome species. "The Valyri were only the latest victims," Yoon continued, "but they made one critical mistake. They called us for help." High Councillor Tal sank slowly back into his seat, suddenly looking ancient and tired. "You don't understand the complexities of galactic governance, Admiral. Sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater stability." "Spare me." Yoon cut him off. "I'm not interested in your justifications. I'm here to tell you how things will be from now on." She straightened to her full height, hands clasped behind her back. "First, the quarantine of Earth ends today, officially and permanently. Any attempt to reinstate it will be considered an act of war." The council members exchanged nervous glances. "Second, humanity will take immediate action to eliminate the remaining Korth forces throughout the galaxy. Not contain them, eliminate them. Your attack dogs have slipped their leash, and we'll put them down." "That's precisely what concerns us," Councillor Mina interjected. "The violence with which your species approaches problems." Yoon didn't let her finish. She activated a final display: footage from ground cameras on Valyri Prime, showing Korth troops executing civilians in the streets. "This is what your precious stability looked like, Councillor," she said, her voice hard. "This is what your fear of human violence permitted to spread throughout the galaxy." The chamber fell silent again as the footage played on. "Third," Yoon continued after a moment, "humanity will take permanent seats on this council, not as petitioners, but as full members with veto power over military decisions." This caused another uproar, louder than before. Several councillors began shouting about precedent and procedure. Yoon waited for the noise to die down. "This isn't a negotiation. While we've been having this conversation, human fleets have been deploying throughout the galaxy. 200 years of isolation gave us time to build. We currently have ships in orbit around every major council world. She let that sink in before continuing. We don't want your territories. We don't want to rule your peoples. But we will. No longer be excluded from a galaxy we have every right to explore. An elderly counselor from a species Yun didn't recognize spoke up. And if we refuse these terms? Yun shrugged. Then we'll deal with the Korth ourselves anyway, and let the peoples of the galaxy decide who they'd rather have protecting them, the council that abandoned them, or the humans who came when called. High Counselor Tal conferred quietly with the others before speaking again. We will need time to consider these proposals. You have 1 hour, Yun replied. My ships are standing by. As she turned to leave the speaking floor, Counselor Mina called out, Why would you help defend a galaxy that rejected you, that feared you? Yun paused, looking back over her shoulder. Because that's what humans do, Counselor. You feared the only species strong enough to protect you. Your mistake wasn't quarantining us. It was failing to understand why we were worth fearing. 57 minutes later, the Council voted to accept all of Earth's terms. By nightfall, human ships were moving throughout the galaxy, hunting down the remaining Korth forces. On 100 worlds, people looked up at their skies and saw unfamiliar vessels, angular utilitarian ships built by beings evolved on a world that should have killed them. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.